Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a truly mind-bending theory about what happened to Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Now, the sources we've looked at, they claim this was absolutely no accident. Instead, they paint a picture of a secret military op, using physics so far out there, it's straight out of science fiction. All right, so let's just jump right in. The whole analysis really starts with this one simple but powerful question. And asking it completely changes how you look at this event. It's not about a tragic accident anymore. It's about deconstructing a deliberate act. And this is the core claim, right from the source material. That phrase, asset denial operation, that's military talk. It means stopping something valuable from getting into enemy hands. So right off the bat, we're not talking about an airline investigation. We're talking about a covert mission. Okay, so if we're saying this was a deliberate act, the very next question has to be why, right? Why would anyone take such an unbelievably extreme and risky step? Well, the sources argue it all came down to a huge national security threat.
So here's the alleged motive. That plane was carrying a 20-person team from a company called Freescale Semiconductor. These weren't just any engineers. They were experts in supercritical control systems. And at that exact time, the sources described this intense counterintelligence crisis brewing between the US and China. This team, on this flight, was supposedly seen as an imminent vector for compromise, basically a single weak point that could leak priceless tech to a major rival.
Now, you don't just pull off an operation of this magnitude on a whim. It would need a serious command structure. And the sources actually lay out a really detailed breakdown of who would have been involved and how it all connects back to the legal framework for U.S. covert ops.
And this part is absolutely crucial. In the U.S., for a covert action like this to even be legal, it requires something called a presidential finding under Title 50. It's basically the legal key that unlocks the whole thing and forces different government agencies to work together. The theory says this had to be step one, creating the legal cover for everything else that happened. The whole show would have been run by what's called a Joint Interagency Task Force, or a JIATF. The CIA would allegedly be in the driver's seat. Why? Well, their operations division gives you plausible deniability, while their science and tech folks handle the new gear. But for the actual muscle, that's where the elite Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC, comes in, providing all the specialized assets needed to get the job done. But it's not just about the main players. The theory also points to specific support units whose whole job was to clean up, so to speak. It highlights the Navy's underwater construction team too, which just happened to be in the area. The claim is they were sent to create an acoustic blackout, disabling underwater listening devices to make sure no one ever heard a crash. At the same time, a top-secret surveillance squadron, VPU-2, was probably listening in, not for a crash, but to gather data on this new technology in action.
All right, so we've got the who and the why. Now let's get to the really wild part, the technology itself. How on earth do you make a whole airplane just disappear? The documents point to a very specific and very exotic area of plasma physics.
The absolute heart of this technology is something called a field-reversed configuration, or an FRC. The easiest way to picture it is like a perfect, super stable, self-contained donut, or maybe a smoke ring made of incredibly hot plasma. Now, the two things you got to remember about it are its insane density and its natural, crazy fast rotation. It spins at these unbelievable speeds all on its own, thanks to its internal magnetic fields. This little plasma smoke ring, that's the engine's building block.
So how do you go from a plasma donut to a space-time engine? Well, the theory says use 3 of them, all working in sync. When you have that much mass, density, and extreme rotation packed into a tiny space, you apparently generate a powerful effect that Einstein himself predicted. It's called frame dragging. The best analogy is a bowling ball spinning in a thick vat of honey. It doesn't just spin, it drags the honey around with it. These FRCs allegedly do the exact same thing but to space-time. They don't just move through space, they literally grab the fabric of the universe and twist it.
Okay, so we're twisting space-time, but how does that lead to a plane vanishing? This is where the theory takes a really stunning leap, connecting this FRC hardware to some of the most cutting-edge, brain-bending ideas in theoretical physics.
It all ties in to something called the ER equals EPR conjecture, a wild idea that came out in 2013. It basically says that two things we thought were totally separate are actually the same. On one side, you've got quantum entanglement, Einstein's spooky action at a distance that links two particles no matter how far apart they are. On the other side, you've got a wormhole, a geometric tunnel through space-time. Well, ER equals EPR says they're just two ways of looking at the same thing.
A wormhole is what entanglement looks like in the real world.
So, if entangling tiny particles creates a tiny wormhole, what happens if you could entangle 3 massive plasma orbs? How would you even do that? The sources point to a process called 4-wave mixing. Think of it like using super precise lasers to create interference patterns inside the plasma, which forces all 3 FRCs into a single shared quantum state. It's macroscopic quantum entanglement. And if ER equals EPR is right, entangling 3 things doesn't just make one simple wormhole. It would create a complex multi-mouth gateway connecting all 3 points.
And get this, the analysis claims this isn't just some wild theory. It actually points to specific US patents that supposedly lay out the engineering. There's a patent by a guy named Salvatore Pais that's cited for creating the exotic matter conditions you'd need to make a wormhole stable enough to pass through. And another one by Richard Van Dorick that describes a way to precisely control these rotating objects without inertia, which is exactly what you'd need to lock 3 FRCs into a perfect, stable, spinning triangle.
Okay, so we've got the motive, the covert team, the mind-bending physics. But here's the million-dollar question. Does any of this impossibly complex theory actually line up with what was supposedly seen? Let's take a look at the alleged visual evidence.
The documents claim the big finale, the main event, is triggered by something called 3D turbulent magnetic reconnection. The best way to think about it is to imagine the magnetic fields inside that plasma are like trillions of wound-up rubber bands, each storing a ton of energy. This process is like finding the one key that makes all of them snap at the exact same instant, releasing all of that stored energy in a violent, explosive flash.
Now, the first alleged visual signature, something you can see in the videos that were supposedly leaked, is this brilliant, blinding flash of light that just completely swallows the aircraft. And that flash lines up perfectly with the massive energy release predicted by that turbulent magnetic reconnection process. When the plasma structure breaks down that violently, it has to release its energy somewhere, and it does so as an incredibly intense burst of light. It's what's called a massive plasma recombination event. But it wasn't just a flash of light. The same footage apparently shows this profound warping of space all around the plane. People who've seen it describe it like looking through a fisheye lens or seeing a distorted bubble in the middle of reality. And that is a perfect visual match for the frame-dragging effect we talked about earlier. The intense gravity and the twisted space-time created by those 3 super-dense spinning FRCs would literally bend the light traveling past them. It would create a powerful gravitational lensing effect, which would look exactly like that fisheye distortion. And finally, there are the 3 orbs themselves. The videos allegedly show 3 distinct orbs moving in a flawless triangular formation. And they're moving in a non-inertial way, meaning they change direction without any visible means of propulsion. This, again, is a dead ringer for both the natural smoke ring shape of FRCs and the kind of precise control system described in that Bandrick patent.
So, when you step back and look at the whole picture, what the sources lay out is a stunningly cohesive theory. You've got a clear motive, a plausible Black Ops command structure, a detailed technological breakdown rooted in advanced physics, and a solid explanation for all the visual signatures. It's a complete, self-contained story that, well, it leaves us with one pretty big